The knuckles split her lip before she could taste the copper. Maya Richardson's head snapped sideways, blood spraying across the booth's cracked vinyl as Corporal Jake Brennan's fist connected with bone. The entire bar went silent. Jukebox, pool cues, breathing. Everything stopped except the sound of her body hitting the seat. "That's what you get," Brennan snarled, shaking out his hand, "for forgetting you're just a diversity hire in a combat uniform." Maya wiped her mouth. Slowly, the blood smeared across her dark skin like war paint. Then she stood up, grabbed her jacket, and walked out without saying a single word. Brennan laughed. His buddies cheered. The phone cameras kept recording. None of them knew they'd just punched a Navy SEAL who'd spent 12 years learning that silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Now, before we show you what happened next, what that one punch set in motion, and why those Marines had just made the biggest mistake of their military careers, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from so we can see how far this story travels. Because what you're about to witness isn't just about one woman's response to violence. It's about the difference between reacting and strategizing, between losing your temper and keeping your power. Stay with us until the very end, because this story doesn't go where you think it does. 47 minutes earlier, Maya had been alone. That was how she preferred it most nights, especially the ones that came after a 16-hour training rotation in the Pacific, where she'd supervised 12 dive candidates through emergency ascent protocols and watched 3 of them quit before sunset. Being a Navy SEAL instructor meant carrying the weight of other people's limitations, and by the time Friday rolled around, she needed the weight off. Rick's Tavern sat just outside the main gate of Naval Base San Diego, close enough to be convenient, far enough to feel separate from the chain of command. The kind of place where the neon buzzed too loud and the bartender knew when to pour and when to walk away. Maya had claimed the corner booth near the back exit 2 months ago, right after her reassignment from Coronado. Nobody bothered her there. The light was dim enough to read by, and the angle gave her a clear view of both entrances. She wasn't reading, though. Not really. The paperback in her hands was the same one she'd been carrying for 6 weeks, stuck on page 93 because every time she tried to focus on the words, her mind drifted back to Syria, to the extraction that had gone sideways, to the pilot's body she'd carried through 2 miles of hostile territory with a dislocated shoulder, to the way his daughter had looked at her during the memorial service, like Maya was supposed to have answers for why her father wasn't coming home. The soda in front of her had gone flat an hour ago, but she kept the glass there anyway. Something to hold, something to give her hands purpose. That's when they walked in. 4 of them. Marines, young, loud, still wearing pieces of their training uniforms like they'd just come from the conditioning yard and couldn't wait to celebrate whatever certification they'd passed. The leader was obvious before he opened his mouth, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of swagger that came from being told he was exceptional without ever being tested by anything real. Corporal Jake Brennan. She'd seen his type 100 times. Hell, she'd trained his type, watched them flame out when the water got too deep and their lungs started screaming, and they realized that confidence without competence was just noise. He dropped into a bar stool like he owned it, voice already carrying across the room. "Victory tastes like top-shelf bourbon, gentlemen." The bartender, Rick, didn't even look up. "1 round, then water." "Come on, Rick," one of the others said, leaning over the bar. "Martinez," according to his half-attached name tag. "4 rounds. We just got our Halo cert." "1, then water." They laughed, not the kind that comes from joy, but the kind that comes from feeling invincible and needing everyone else to know it. Maya turned a page she hadn't read. That's when Brennan noticed her. He went quiet for just a second, eyes narrowing as he took in the corner booth, the woman sitting alone, the dive unit insignia barely visible on her jacket collar. Then he nudged Martinez with his elbow. "Desk seal," he said, not quite whispering. The smallest one, Corporal Chen, smirked. "Diver seal, they don't count." "I heard she got pulled from active duty last quarter," the fourth Marine added. Williams. "Pressure tolerance issues, inner ear damage." Rick's hand stopped halfway to the glass rack. Just for a second. Then he continued pouring, but his jaw had tightened. Brennan leaned back on his stool, making sure his voice would carry. "So she's not just a fake seal. She's a broken one." Maya kept her eyes on the page. She'd heard worse, had it shouted at her during Hell Week by instructors who wanted to see if she'd break, had it whispered behind her back by teammates who resented her presence until the first time she saved their asses in open water. Words only had the power you gave them, and she'd stopped giving them power a long time ago. But Brennan wanted a reaction. Needs one, the way small men always need validation for their cruelty. "Hey, sweetheart," he called out. "That soda looks tired. We want a real drink? We got bottles older than your pension." Nothing. He scoffed, looking at his friends. "Maybe she can't hear us. Probably still got water in her ears." "That's enough," Rick said, setting down the towel he'd been using. But Brennan wasn't listening. He grabbed his glass, took a long sip, and as he lowered it, his elbow knocked the rest across the bar. Liquid splashed wide, some of it catching the floor, some of it hitting the toe of Maya's boot. She looked down, looked at the spreading puddle, looked back at her book. Brennan stood up, slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. "You going to clean that, sweetheart?" Maya closed the book. Not hard, not loud, just final. She set it aside and raised her eyes to meet his. "You made the mess, Corporal." Her voice wasn't sharp. It was surgical, flat. The kind of tone that doesn't cut until you realize hours later that you've been bleeding the whole time. One of the younger Marines behind Brennan barked a laugh. Brennan gave a mock look of surprise. "Didn't know SEALs came with a sarcasm module. Must have been installed after the warranty expired." The others snorted. Chen pulled out his phone, screen already glowing. "Let's see if the SEAL barks worse than she bites," he muttered, thumb swiping to video mode. Brennan stepped forward. Too close. Close enough that Maya could smell the bourbon on his breath, see the vein pulsing in his temple. "You got a problem with authority, Lieutenant Commander?" The rank came out twisted, mocking. "I heard deep water operators can't hold eye contact once you drag them above sea level." Maya didn't blink, didn't flinch, and that made him angrier. He leaned in, grinned, and with 2 fingers flicked her forehead. Light, mocking, like a schoolyard dare. "What's the matter? Lost your pressure gauge?" Rick moved around the bar. "That's it, you're done, back off." But before he could reach the booth, Brennan struck. It wasn't a full swing, just a sudden palm knuckle shot, close enough to bruise, sharp enough to shock, straight across Maya's cheekbone. The blow cracked through the bar like thunder. Her head rocked sideways, shoulder catching the corner of the booth. For a moment she was down on one knee, spine folding, one hand braced against the seat. Gasps shot across the room. One of the pool players dropped his cue. Rick froze mid-step, eyes wide. Even Brennan looked surprised, like he'd expected her to dodge, to fight back, to do something other than take it. Then Chen's voice, quiet but clear. "You get that?" The phone screen glowed red. Recording. Maya rose, slow, no stagger, no hand for balance. Blood trickled from her bottom lip, catching along the side of her chin. She wiped it with her knuckle, looked at the red smear, then looked at Rick, then at the phone, then at Brennan. "You're done here," she said. Not a threat, a fact, calm as reading a grocery list. Brennan laughed, forced. "Yeah? You going to call the bar police?" Maya didn't answer. She picked up her jacket, slid one arm in, then the other, zipped it halfway. She walked past Rick, past the Marines, past the pool table and the shocked faces, and the phone still recording. Straight out the back exit. No limp, no hesitation, no looking back. A long beat of silence filled the space she'd left behind. Then Martinez called after her, voice cracking on the edge of laughter. "Guess that's a SEAL for you. Sinks without a fight." They laughed again, but this time it sounded thinner. Performed. Like they were trying to convince themselves they'd won something. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for 3 cars and a flickering sodium light that turned everything yellow-gray. Maya paused beneath it, brushed her collar straight, and walked toward the small brick security outpost at the base access gate. Inside, a young MP looked up from his chair, surprised to see anyone at this hour. "Ma'am?" Maya gave him Brennan's name, badge number, the names of the other 3. Her tone hadn't changed. Still flat, still surgical. "I'm reporting an off-base incident involving 4 active Marines. Minor assault. Witnesses present. Video documentation likely." The MP blinked, pen hovering over the incident form. "Do you want to file formal charges, ma'am?" "No," Maya said. "I want it documented." She turned and left before he could ask anything else. Not limping, not looking back, just walking, like she already knew the next step was hers to set. Back inside Rick's tavern, the laughter didn't last long. It echoed too wide in the half-empty room, bouncing off silent stares and bar stool shadows that didn't join in. Even the jukebox stayed quiet, like it knew better than to fill the space with noise. Rick hadn't moved from his spot behind the bar. When Brennan tried to order another round, Rick didn't even reach for the bottle. "You're cut off." Brennan raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" Rick stared straight through him. "This place doesn't serve cowards." For a second, it looked like Brennan might argue. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. But something in the bartender's tone, something in the way the rest of the room had gone deadly silent, made the other Marines pull him back by the elbow. "Come on," Martinez muttered. "Let's get out of here." They stumbled out into the night, still laughing but quieter now, uncertain. By the time they reached the parking lot, the video was already making rounds. Sen had sent it to their group chat first, then to the platoon thread, then someone else shared it to the battalion page with the caption, "SEAL gets checked." Within 20 minutes, it had 47 views. Within an hour, 212. By midnight, half the base had seen it. In the Marine barracks, Corporal Vance sat on his footlocker, watching the clip loop for the 3rd time on his bunkmate's phone. Around him, 5 other Marines crowded close, some laughing, others just watching with arms folded. "Brennan really went for it," someone muttered. "About time someone knocked her off that high horse," another added. But Vance wasn't laughing. He kept watching the moment after the punch, the way she stood, the way her face didn't change, how she just picked up her jacket and walked out like nothing had landed. "You see that?" Vance said, pointing at the screen. "See what?" She didn't even flinch. His bunkmate shrugged. "So, she's probably just embarrassed." "No." Vance rewound it, played it again. "That's not embarrassment. That's something else." "What?" Vance didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the screen, at the way Maya's eyes had tracked Brennan even as she was falling, at the way she'd calculated every step of her exit. "Control," he finally said. "That's control." Across the compound in the SEAL ready room, the mood was different. 3 candidates sat near the gear lockers, voices low. Petty Officer Davis leaned against the wall, arms crossed tight, jaw set. "How many people you think have seen it?" one of them asked. "Enough," Davis said, "and they're all missing the point." "Which is?" Davis looked up. His expression was hard, carved from something that didn't bend. "She let him do it." The youngest candidate frowned. Why would she do that? Because now it's documented. Now it's not his word against hers. It's video evidence of a Marine corporal assaulting a SEAL officer in a public bar. Davis pushed off the wall, started pacing. And if I know Commander Richardson, she's not done. She's just getting started. Another candidate leaned forward. "You served under her before?" "2 rotations. Mogadishu extract, 2019. Davis's voice went quieter. "She took shrapnel to the shoulder, pulling a contractor out of a collapsed safe house. Didn't say a word. Just kept moving. Didn't even report it until we were wheels up and the medic noticed blood." He stopped pacing, turned to face them. "Brennan thinks he embarrassed her. What he actually did was give her a reason to recalibrate the entire standard." Silence settled over the group like fog. Then one of them spoke quietly. "What do you think happens next?" Davis didn't answer right away. He just looked toward the window, toward the admin building where command sat on the 2nd floor, lights still burning despite the late hour. "Something precise," he finally said. Then the red and blue lights hit the frosted glass. 2 base security vehicles rolled up, silent. No sirens, just calm authority. One MP stepped inside while the other waited by the door. He wasn't carrying a weapon, didn't need to. He scanned the room once, then, "Corporal Brennan, in Corporals Martinez, Chen, and Williams. Step outside." Brennan smirked, lifting his hands in mock surrender. "Guess someone tattled." Outside, under the glow of the perimeter lamps, the 4 Marines stood shoulder to shoulder while IDs were checked and statements taken. The MP's tone remained neutral, clipboard efficient. "Report filed as minor disturbance. Further review pending." Brennan signed the sheet without reading it. "She won't press charges. Just wanted to feel powerful for once." He handed the clipboard back and walked toward the lot with the swagger of someone who'd already rewritten the memory to favor himself. Behind them, Rick locked the front door early. Didn't even finish counting the register. Just turned off the neon sign and went home, knowing that some nights, closing early was the only decent thing left to do. Maya didn't go home. She went to the base gym instead, the one that stayed open 24 hours for personnel on irregular rotations. At 200, it was empty, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant clang of free weights someone had left on the rack. She changed into running gear and hit the treadmill. Not fast, just steady. Mile after mile at the same pace, watching the distance climb on the digital display while her mind worked through what came next. The bruise on her cheekbone was already darkening, visible in the mirror across from the cardio equipment. Good. Let it show. Let everyone see exactly what Brennan had done. Documentation. That was the key. Always had been. In a system designed to protect the powerful, the only weapon the powerless had was evidence. And Brennan had just handed her a video confession recorded by his own people, witnessed by a bar full of personnel, documented by base security. He'd thought he was putting her in her place. What he'd actually done was put himself in hers. Maya ran for 90 minutes straight. When she finally stopped, her shirt was soaked through and her legs were shaking, but her mind was clear. She showered, changed back into her uniform, walked across the compound to the admin building just as the sun started to break over the eastern fence line. The duty officer looked up from his desk, surprised. "Ma'am, everything okay?" "I need to file a formal training request," Maya said. "Joint conditioning exercise, mixed units. Tomorrow morning, 0700. He pulled up the scheduling system. What's the focus? Underwater rescue simulation. Partner coordination under pressure. Participants? Maya rattled off a list of names. Every SEAL candidate currently in rotation. Every Marine corporal who'd been in that bar last night. The duty officer's eyes widened slightly when he saw Brennan's name on the list, but he didn't comment, just entered it into the system. You're listed as lead instructor? Correct. Duration? Until standards are met. He printed the schedule, handed her a copy. It's posted, ma'am. They'll get notification by 0600. Maya took the paper, folded it once, and walked out into the early morning light. Somewhere across the base, Brennan was probably still asleep, dreaming of his victory. He had no idea he'd just been drafted into a war he couldn't win. Because Maya Richardson didn't fight in bars. She fought in training yards where every movement was observed, every failure documented, every excuse stripped away by objective measurement. And by the time the sun finished rising, everyone on this base was going to understand the difference between a woman who couldn't fight back and a woman who chose not to. Yet. At 0547, Brennan's phone buzzed with the training notification. He rolled over, squinted at the screen, and saw the subject line. Mandatory Joint Conditioning, 0700, Lead Instructor, Lieutenant Commander Richardson. He sat up, read it again. You've got to be kidding me. Martinez groaned from the bunk above him. What? That's SEAL. She scheduled a training session. We're on the roster. So, skip it. It says mandatory. Since when does a SEAL get to mandate Marine training? Brennan scrolled down to the authorization line, improved by Base Commander Holland. Attendance required for all listed personnel. He threw his phone across the room. She's insane. But even as he said it, a small voice in the back of his mind, the one he'd been ignoring since last night, whispered something different. She's strategic, and you just became her demonstration model. At 0653, the training bay doors opened with a metallic groan that echoed across the empty pool deck. Maya stood in the center of the room, already in full dive gear, watching as the first group of Marines filtered in. Their boots squeaked against the wet concrete, eyes darting everywhere except at her. Brennan came in last. He'd clearly prepared himself, jaw set, shoulders back, the posture of a man who'd decided confidence could replace competence. When he finally looked at her, his eyes went straight to the bruise on her cheekbone, frank purple now, spreading toward her temple like spilled ink. He didn't apologize, didn't look away, just planted himself at the front of the formation like he owned the space. Corporal Brennan, Maya said. Her voice carried across the bay without rising. Front and center. He walked forward, too slow, making everyone wait. You're partnered with Petty Officer Darien. Pool 1. Weighted dummy retrieval. 3-minute standard. Darien was already suited up, a lean CO candidate with serious eyes and the kind of quiet that comes from actually knowing what you're doing. He glanced at Brennan once, then at Maya. Ma'am, permission to speak? Granted. Does he know the safety protocols? Brennan's face flushed. I've done water training. Not dive training, Darien said flatly. There's a difference. Maya checked her watch. You have 30 seconds to gear up, Corporal. Clock starts whether you're ready or not. Brennan grabbed a vest from the rack, fumbling with the straps. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from rage, barely contained. Martinez and Chen watched from the sidelines, both of them suddenly very interested in the condition of their bootlaces. The horn buzzed. Brennan and Darien hit the water. It went wrong immediately. Brennan swam wide, arms flailing more than stroking, while Darien dove clean and smooth toward the 12-foot marker where the weighted dummy sat secured to the bottom. By the time Brennan reached him, Darian had already released the base clip and was maneuvering the 180-pound form toward the surface. "Grab the left side," Darian said, words bubbling through his regulator. Brennan grabbed right. The dummy twisted. Darian compensated, but Brennan overcorrected, and suddenly they were both fighting the weight instead of working with it. The dummy sank deeper. Precious seconds burned away. When they finally wrestled it to the deck, the timer read 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Maya didn't move from her position, just looked down at her clipboard. "Again." Brennan hauled himself out of the pool, chest heaving. "He grabbed early. That's not on me." Maya's pen didn't stop moving across the page. "I didn't ask for an explanation, Corporal. I gave you a standard. You failed it. Again." "This is bullshit," Brennan muttered, but not quite soft enough. Maya's pen stopped. She looked up. The entire bay went silent. "Repeat that, please." Brennan's jaw worked. For a second, he looked like he might actually say it louder. Then Martinez caught his eye from across the deck, shaking his head in the smallest possible motion. "Nothing, ma'am," Brennan finally said. "Good. Because if you have concerns about the fairness of this exercise, you're welcome to file a formal complaint with Base Commander Holland. I believe he's reviewing incident reports this morning, including ones from Friday night." The words landed like depth charges. Brennan's face went white, then red, then white again. Chen suddenly found something fascinating about the ceiling tiles. Maya turned to the rest of the group. "Rotation continues. Martinez and Chen, you're up next. Pool 2. Same drill. Move." They moved. Fast. Over the next hour, Maya ran them through the circuit with surgical precision. Every pair that failed the time standard ran it again, and again. No exceptions, no breaks. The only sound was water churning, bodies gasping, and Maya's voice calling out times that never quite met the mark. By 08:20, 3 Marines had vomited from exhaustion, 2 SEAL candidates were cramping, and Brennan had failed the retrieval drill 4 times in a row. "Reset," Maya said for the 5th time. Darian looked at her. "Ma'am, he's done. He can't—" "I didn't ask for your assessment, petty officer. I asked for a successful retrieval." "Reset." Brennan was bent over the deck edge, shoulders heaving. "I need a minute." "You don't get minutes in combat, Corporal. You get seconds. And the person drowning next to you doesn't care if you're tired." She paused. "Now get back in the water or quit. Your choice." He got back in the water. This time, he made it halfway to the dummy before his arms gave out completely. Darian had to haul him to the surface and drag him to the deck like he was the weighted dummy. Maya finally moved. She walked to the edge of the pool, squatted down so she was eye level with Brennan as he lay gasping on the concrete. "You want to know why you keep failing, Corporal?" He couldn't answer, couldn't breathe enough to form words. "Because you're still trying to do it alone. Still trying to prove you're the strongest person in the water. But strength without coordination is just chaos, and chaos gets people killed." She stood up, walked to the equipment rack, and while everyone watched, she stripped off her jacket, kicked off her boots, and dove into the pool fully clothed. Pants, shirt, everything. The water swallowed her whole. 10 seconds passed. 20. 30. Then she surfaced, with the dummy locked against her chest, one arm hooked under its chin, legs driving in a powerful scissor kick that looked effortless but carried the weight of a full-grown man. She pivoted at the deck edge, braced her free hand against the concrete, and in one smooth surge, pushed the dummy up and over. She pulled herself out after it. Water streamed from her uniform, pooling at her feet. Her shirt clung to her shoulders, revealing the thick scar tissue that ran from her collarbone to her shoulder blade. Shrapnel marks from Mogadishu, though nobody in this room knew that story. Standard time is 3 minutes, Maya said, wringing water from her sleeve. I just did it in 1:47, alone, while wearing 30 pounds of soaked clothing. She looked at Brennan. You failed because you're not as good as you think you are. And until you accept that, you'll keep failing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then, from the observation deck above, a slow clap started. Everyone looked up. Master Chief Torres stood at the railing, arms crossed, the hint of a smile on his weathered face. Demonstration complete, Commander? Yes, Master Chief. Outstanding. He looked down at the exhausted Marines. Carry on. He disappeared back through the doorway, but his presence had shifted something in the room. Suddenly, this wasn't just a training exercise. It was a performance review, and everyone had just been graded. Maya grabbed a towel from the rack, but didn't dry off, just draped it over her shoulder. 15-minute break, hydrate, then we run the scenario again. All of you. And we'll keep running it until someone meets standard. Brennan finally found his voice. You're trying to humiliate us. Maya turned to face him. Really face him, for the first time since the bar. No, Corporal. I'm trying to teach you. But if you want to feel humiliated, that's on you. She walked toward the locker room exit, water still dripping from her uniform. As she passed Martinez, he opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it again. Chen just stared at the floor. The break lasted exactly 15 minutes. When Maya returned, changed into dry gear but still looking like she could run the drill another 50 times without breaking a sweat, the energy had shifted. The Marines were huddled together, voices low. The SEAL candidates were stretching separately, but watching. Time's up, Maya called. Williams and Henderson, you're next. Let's see if anyone learned anything. Williams was one of the younger Marines, barely 22, still carrying baby fat under his tactical vest. He looked terrified. His SEAL partner, Henderson, put a hand on his shoulder. Just breathe and follow my lead. This isn't a race, it's a rhythm. They hit the water together. This time the coordination was better. Not perfect, but better. When Henderson signaled left, Williams went left. When Henderson dove, Williams followed the same angle. They reached the dummy together, released it together, and brought it up in a controlled ascent that actually looked like teamwork. Time, 3 minutes and 4 seconds. Close. So damn close. Again, Maya said. Williams looked like he might cry, but he got back in the water. Second attempt, 2 minutes, 58 seconds. Maya's pen moved across the clipboard. Acceptable. Next pair. A collective exhale rippled through the group. Someone had finally met the standard. It was possible. Over the next rotation, 2 more pairs succeeded. The energy started to shift from resentful to determined. Even Brennan seemed to be paying attention now, watching the successful retrievals with something that might have been actual focus instead of arrogance. Brennan and Darian, Maya called. Final attempt. Brennan pulled on his vest without comment. Darian handed him a regulator without meeting his eyes. Listen to me this time, Darian said quietly. Not the voice in your head telling you to be the hero. Me. Brennan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. They dove. This time, Brennan followed Darian's lead. When Darian signaled to wait, Brennan waited. When Darian pointed to grab the harness, Brennan grabbed exactly where indicated. The ascent was rough. Brennan's kicks were still sloppy, but they moved as a unit. 2 minutes 59 seconds. 1 second over standard. Brennan surfaced, saw the time, and slammed his fist against the deck. God damn it! Maya looked at him for a long moment, then... Acceptable. What? But we didn't... You worked as a team. You listened to your partner. You completed the objective without endangering anyone. She made a mark on her clipboard. That's the actual standard, Corporal. The time is just a metric. The real test is whether you can put your ego aside long enough to keep your teammate alive. Brennan hauled himself out of the pool. He looked exhausted, defeated. But something in his eyes had changed. The swagger was gone. What replaced it wasn't quite humility, but it was closer than he'd been 2 hours ago. Maya checked her watch. 09:45. Training secured. Gear stowed and accounted for by 1000. Dismissed. The group dispersed slowly, too tired to rush. Brennan stayed near the pool edge, staring down at the water like it held answers he hadn't known he was looking for. Darian walked past him, then paused. Hey. Brennan looked up. You didn't quit. That's something. Didn't feel like I had a choice. You always have a choice. That's the point. Darian nodded toward where Maya was organizing gear at the equipment rack. She could have had you court-martialed for what you did Friday. Instead, she had you in the water at 700, teaching you how not to drown your partner. He walked away, leaving Brennan alone with that thought. Maya was the last one in the training bay. She'd stayed to inventory the equipment, check the oxygen levels in the spare tanks, make sure everything was secured properly. The work was meditative, familiar. It gave her hands something to do while her mind processed what had just happened. The door opened. She didn't turn around. Commander Richardson. That voice she recognized. Base Commander Holland. She straightened, turned, came to attention. At ease. Holland walked across the deck, hands clasped behind his back. Master Chief Torres gave me his assessment of this morning's training. And? He said it was the most effective use of controlled humiliation he's seen in 20 years. Holland almost smiled. His words, not mine. Maya didn't respond, just waited. Holland stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the bruise on her face clearly in the overhead lights. He stared at it for a moment, jaw tightening. I've reviewed the security footage from Friday night. Multiple angles, audio enhancement, witness statements. He paused. I've also reviewed the locker bay incident from yesterday. Yes, sir. You understand that I could bring charges against Corporal Brennan right now. Article 128, assault. Article 134, conduct unbecoming. The evidence is overwhelming. I understand, sir. Then why haven't you pressed charges? Maya met his eyes. Because charges would get him removed from my training rotation, sir. Holland's eyebrows rose slightly. And you want him in your rotation? I want him to understand what he did wrong. A court-martial would just make him a martyr to his friends. He'd tell himself the system was biased, that I used my rank unfairly, that he was the real victim. She paused. But if I teach him why he failed, not punish him for failing, but actually teach him, that's a lesson that sticks. Holland studied her for a long moment. You're playing a dangerous game, Commander. With respect, sir, I'm not playing. No, Holland said quietly. I suppose you're not. He pulled a folder from under his arm, handed it to her. This is the official incident report from Friday night. It includes statements from the bartender, 3 witnesses, and the responding MPS. It also includes frame-by-frame analysis of the video Corporal Chen recorded. Maya opened the folder. The images were brutal in their clarity. Brennan's fist mid-swing. The impact. Her head snapping sideways. Blood. I'm filing this with JAG, Holland continued. Whether or not you press charges, there will be an administrative hearing. Monday morning, 0900. You'll be required to testify. Understood, sir. Brennan and his accomplices will also testify. Their unit commander will be present. This will go on their permanent records. Maya closed the folder. What do you need from me, sir? The truth, that's all. Just tell them exactly what happened. He paused. And for what it's worth, Commander, I think what you're doing is right. Difficult, but right." He left without waiting for a response. Maya stood alone in the empty training bay, holding a folder full of evidence that could end 3 military careers. Outside, she could hear voices as the last of the trainees headed toward the mess hall, laughing about something. The world moving on like it always did. She tucked the folder under her arm and walked out into the morning sun. Across the compound, in the Marine barracks, Brennan sat on his footlocker with his head in his hands. His roommate, Davis, watched him from the desk chair. "You look like hell," Davis said. "I feel worse." "What'd she do to you?" Brennan laughed, bitter. "Nothing." "That's the problem. She just made me do it, right? Over and over, until I understood why I was doing it wrong." Davis leaned back. "That's worse than punishment." "Yeah." Brennan looked up. "Yeah, it is." "You gonna apologize?" "For what? She's not gonna accept it." "Not for her. For you." Brennan stared at the floor. The bruises on his ego hurt worse than any bruises on his body. All his life he'd been told he was exceptional, top of his class, first to volunteer, the guy who got things done. And then one morning, a woman he'd assaulted had proven that everything he thought he knew about himself was built on quicksand. "I don't know how," he finally admitted. Davis stood up, grabbed his jacket. "Figure it out. Because Monday, you're standing in front of a JAG board explaining why you hit a superior officer. And I don't know isn't gonna cut it." He left Brennan alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that Friday night had been the biggest mistake of his life. The weekend passed slowly. Maya spent Saturday reviewing training protocols and Sunday at the beach, running 8 miles in soft sand because the burn in her legs helped quiet the noise in her head. She didn't think about Monday, didn't rehearse her testimony. She'd learned a long time ago that the truth didn't need practice. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, marine layer sitting heavy over the base like a wet blanket. Maya dressed in her full-service uniform, every ribbon and medal placed exactly where it belonged. The Purple Heart from Mogadishu, the Navy Cross from a classified op she still couldn't talk about, the small bronze V that meant valor under fire. She looked at herself in the mirror. The bruise had faded to yellow-green, still visible but no longer shocking. Her lip had healed cleanly. No permanent damage, at least not the visible kind. At 08:45, she walked into the JAG building and took a seat outside conference room 3A. The hallway was empty except for a single MP standing post by the door. He nodded at her respectfully. "Ma'am?" "Corporal?" At 08:55, Brennan arrived. He was flanked by his CO, Captain Morrison, a hard-eyed man in his 40s who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Behind them came Martinez, Chen, and Williams, all in dress uniform, all walking like they were headed to their own executions. Brennan saw Maya sitting there. Their eyes met. He looked away first. Captain Morrison did not. "Commander Richardson," he said stiffly. "Captain?" "I want you to know that what happened Friday night does not reflect the values of my command." Maya stood. "Then I suggest you examine why it happened under your watch, sir." Morrison's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond, just walked past her into the conference room. The MP opened the door. "Commander, they're ready for you." Maya took a breath, straightened her uniform, and walked in to tell the truth. The conference room smelled like old coffee and anxiety. Maya took her seat at the witness table, hands folded on the surface in front of her, back straight. Across from her sat a 3-officer panel, Commander Holland in the center, flanked by Captain Patricia Reeves from JAG and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb from Marine Command. Brennan sat at the respondent table with Captain Morrison. Martinez, Chen, and Williams were lined against the back wall, like soldiers waiting for inspection. All of them stared at different points in the room, careful not to look at Maya or each other. Holland opened a folder, adjusted his reading glasses.
This hearing is convened to review incidents occurring on Friday, November 15th at Rick's Tavern and Sunday, November 17th in the base training facility. Lieutenant Commander Maya Richardson, you've been called to provide testimony. Do you understand the nature of these proceedings?
Yes, sir.
Please state for the record what occurred on the night of November 15th. Maya's voice came out level, clinical. At approximately 21:30 hours, I was seated in the rear booth of Rick's Tavern when 4 Marines entered the establishment. Corporal Brennan initiated verbal contact, making remarks about my qualifications and service record. The interaction escalated when he intentionally spilled his drink near my position. When I declined to respond to his provocation, he approached my booth and struck me with a closed fist across the left cheekbone. Captain Reeves leaned forward. And what was your response, Commander? I exited the establishment and reported the incident to base security at 21:47 hours. You didn't defend yourself? No, ma'am. Why not? Maya looked at Reeves directly. Because defending myself would have created a he said, she said situation. Documenting it created evidence. A ripple of something moved through the room. Morrison shifted in his seat. Brennan's jaw clenched so tight Maya could hear his teeth grinding. Holland pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen. We have security footage from the tavern. We also have video recorded by Corporal Chen on his personal device. Commander, are you prepared to view these recordings? Yes, sir. The lights dimmed. The screen on the wall flickered to life. Maya watched herself from 3 different angles, watched Brennan approach, watched the flick to her forehead, watched his fist connect with her face, watched herself fall, rise, and walk out in perfect silence. The audio picked up everything, the slurs, the laughter, Martinez's comment about her sinking without a fight. When it ended, the room stayed dark for a beat too long. Holland cleared his throat. Corporal Brennan, do you dispute any of what we just observed? Brennan stood. His hands were shaking. No, sir, but I'd like to explain. Explanations come later. Right now I'm establishing facts. Did you strike Lieutenant Commander Richardson? Yes, sir. Did you use racial slurs during this encounter? Brennan's face flushed. I don't remember exactly what I... Holland replayed the audio. Brennan's voice filled the room. That's what you get for forgetting you're just a diversity hire in a combat uniform. Yes, sir, Brennan whispered. Did Corporals Martinez, Chen, and Williams participate in this harassment? They were there, sir, but they didn't... Did they attempt to stop you? Silence. Answer the question, Corporal. No, sir. They didn't. Holland made a note. Let's move to the second incident. Commander Richardson, what occurred on November 17th in the training facility locker bay? Maya's voice remained steady. Following the conclusion of the morning training session at approximately 09:45 hours, I returned to the locker bay to inventory equipment. Corporal Brennan entered with Corporals Martinez and Williams. He approached me and initiated verbal confrontation regarding the training exercises. What did he say? He stated that I had embarrassed him and his unit, that I was abusing my authority. And then? He attempted to strike me again. I employed defensive measures to neutralize the threat. All 3 Marines were subdued without injury, and base security was immediately notified. Captain Reeves's eyebrows rose. You subdued 3 Marines? Yes, ma'am. By yourself? Yes, ma'am. Morrison made a sound halfway between a cough and a laugh. Webb shot him a look that could have stripped paint. Holland pulled up more footage.
This time it showed the locker bay from the ceiling-mounted security camera.
Maya standing near the equipment rack. Brennan approaching, finger jabbing the air between them. Then the lunge. And then movement so fast the camera almost couldn't track it. Brennan on the floor, Martinez swept, Williams locked and controlled. 10 seconds from threat to resolution. "Commander," Webb said, speaking for the first time. His voice carried the gravel of 30 years in the Corps. "Why didn't you report this assault immediately?" "I did report it, sir. I informed the security officers when they arrived on scene." "But you didn't press charges?" "No, sir." "Why not?" Maya took a breath. This was the question she'd known was coming, the one that would determine whether anyone in this room actually understood what she'd been trying to do. "Because punishment without understanding breeds resentment, sir. I wanted Corporal Brennan to learn why his behavior was unacceptable, not just face consequences for it."
"That's not your job," Webb said sharply. "Your job is to report violations of the UCMJ and allow the chain of command to handle discipline." "With respect, sir, my job is to train personnel to function effectively in high-stress combat situations. That includes teaching them to respect their teammates, regardless of gender or race. A court-martial would have removed Corporal Brennan from my training rotation before that lesson could take root." Webb leaned back. "So you took it upon yourself to administer unofficial punishment through training exercises?" "No, sir. I ran standard qualification drills that every person in that rotation is required to pass." "The other instructors say your drills were significantly more difficult than usual." "The standard is the standard, sir. I don't lower it for personal comfort." Morrison finally spoke up, voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This is exactly the problem. Commander Richardson has a personal vendetta against my Marines. She's using her position to—" "Captain Morrison," Holland cut him off, voice ice cold. "Your Marine struck a superior officer, twice, on video, in front of witnesses. If anyone in this room has compromised their position, it's not Commander Richardson." Morrison's mouth snapped shut. Holland turned to Brennan. "Corporal, you'll have your opportunity to speak, but before you do, understand that nothing you say will erase what happened. The only question is whether you understand why it was wrong." Brennan stood again. He looked smaller than he had Friday night. The swagger had been pressure-washed away by 3 days of facing what he'd actually done. "Permission to speak, sir?" "Granted." "I was wrong." The words came out rough, like they'd been dragged over broken glass. "I was drunk. I was angry about things that had nothing to do with Commander Richardson, and I took it out on her because—" He stopped, started again. "Because I could. Because I thought there wouldn't be consequences. Because I'm used to getting away with things when I'm with my guys." Martinez flinched like he'd been slapped. "And the racial comments?" Reeves asked. Brennan's hands clenched. "I grew up in a town where that kind of talk was normal, where my dad said worse at the dinner table every night. I don't know what I thought, that it was just words, that it didn't matter." "It matters," Webb said quietly. "I know that now, sir." Brennan looked at Maya for the first time since the hearing started. "I know a lot of things now that I didn't know Friday night." Maya met his eyes, but didn't speak. "What changed?" Holland asked. "Saturday morning, sir. In the pool. I failed that drill 6 times, and I couldn't understand why. I'm strong. I'm trained. I've done water work before. But nothing worked until Petty Officer Darien told me to stop trying to do it alone. To actually listen to my partner instead of just powering through." He swallowed hard. "And then Commander Richardson got in the water, fully clothed, and did in 90 seconds what I couldn't do in 20 minutes. And I realized she wasn't trying to humiliate me. She was showing me that everything I thought made me good at this job was actually making me terrible at it. The room was completely silent. She could have had me arrested Friday night, Brennan continued. Could have ended my career before I even understood what I'd lost. But she didn't. She made me show up Saturday morning and face what I'd done. Made me fail in front of everyone, until I understood why I was failing. His voice cracked slightly. That's harder than any punishment you could give me, sir. Holland exchanged glances with Reeves and Webb. Some silent communication passed between them that Maya couldn't read. Corporal Martinez, Holland said, you were present both nights. What's your testimony? Martinez stood. He looked sick. I should have stopped him, sir. Friday night I saw Brennan getting aggressive and I thought it was funny. Thought he was just blowing off steam. By the time I realized it had gone too far, it was already over. And Sunday in the locker bay? I went with him because he was my boy. Because that's what you do. You back up your unit. But standing there, watching him try to hit her again. Martinez closed his eyes. I knew it was wrong. And I still didn't stop it. I'm as guilty as he is. Chen was next. His voice came out barely above a whisper. I recorded it because I thought it would be funny, sir. Thought we'd watch it later and laugh. I didn't think about how it would look. What it meant that I was documenting someone getting assaulted and doing nothing. Williams couldn't even look up when his turn came. I'm 21 years old, sir. I've been a Marine for 11 months. And in that time, I've learned that if you want to fit in, you go along with what the senior guys do. You laugh at their jokes. You back their plays, even when you know it's wrong. His hands were shaking. I watched Corporal Brennan hit Commander Richardson, and I was relieved it wasn't me getting hit. How messed up is that? Webb wrote something down. That's honest, at least. Holland stood. This panel will recess for 30 minutes to deliberate. All parties remain available. Everyone rose. The three officers filed out through the back door. Morrison immediately grabbed Brennan by the arm, pulled him into the hallway. Maya could hear his angry whispers through the thin walls, but couldn't make out words. She stayed in her seat. Reeves's assistant brought her water in a paper cup. She drank it without tasting. Martinez approached slowly, stopping a few feet away. Commander? Maya looked up. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know. I'm sorry. Tell me something, Corporal. If I had been a male officer, would Brennan have hit me? Martinez's face crumpled. No, ma'am. If I had been white, would he have used those words? No, ma'am. Then your sorry needs to be followed by action, because apologizing to me is easy. Changing the culture that made you think this was acceptable? That's the hard part. She stood, walked to the window. Outside, the morning fog was starting to burn off. Marines ran PT in formation across the quad, their cadence call drifting through the glass. The world kept turning. The door opened. Morrison came back in alone, face red. He didn't look at Maya, just took his seat and waited. At exactly 09:45, the panel returned. Holland remained standing. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this panel finds Corporal Jacob Brennan guilty of Article 128, assault of a superior commissioned officer. Additionally, conduct in violation of Article 134, bringing discredit upon the armed forces. Brennan stood rigid. Corporals Martinez, Chen, and Williams are found guilty of Article 134, failure to report misconduct, and participation in conduct unbecoming. The three of them stood together, a unified wall of regret. Sentencing is as follows, Holland continued. Corporal Brennan, reduction in rank to private first class, forfeiture of half pay for 3 months, restriction to base for 6 months, Required completion of cultural sensitivity training and anger management counseling. This will be entered into your permanent record. Brennan's shoulders sagged, but he didn't make a sound. Corporals Martinez, Chen, and Williams. Formal reprimand to be entered into your service records. Mandatory completion of bystander intervention training. 45 days restriction to base. Holland looked at each of them in turn. Let me be clear. You are being given a second chance that many in your position would not receive. That chance exists because Commander Richardson specifically requested it. Do you understand? All four of them turned to look at Maya. She kept her eyes forward. Yes, sir, they said in unison. Then this hearing is concluded. All parties are dismissed except Commander Richardson. Ma'am, a moment, please. The room emptied. Morrison herded his Marines out like they were children who'd embarrassed him at church. When the door closed, only Holland, Reeves, Webb, and Maya remained. Reeves spoke first. That was one of the more unusual testimonies I've heard in 15 years of JAG work. How so, ma'am? Usually the victim wants maximum punishment. You advocated for leniency. Maya finally sat down. Suddenly, she was exhausted. I didn't want leniency, ma'am. I wanted transformation. There's a difference. Webb grunted. Most people would have crushed them. You had every right. Rights aren't the same as solutions, sir. I could have destroyed Brennan's career, made an example of him. But then what? Another angry man with a grudge and a dishonorable discharge finding new ways to hurt people? Or worse, staying in and telling everyone who'd listen that the system was rigged against him. You don't think the system is rigged? Reeves asked quietly. Maya met her eyes. I think the system is exactly what we make it, ma'am. I've spent 12 years in the Navy watching women and minorities get pushed out because they respond to harassment the way everyone expects them to. With anger, with complaints, with demands for justice. And they're right to demand justice. But right doesn't always win. She paused. I wanted to show that there's another way. That discipline and competence speak louder than rage. That you can hold people accountable without destroying them. Because if we can't rehabilitate someone like Brennan, young, salvageable, capable of growth, then what's the point of any of this? Holland leaned back in his chair. You're an idealist, Commander. No, sir. I'm a realist who still has hope. Webb stood, extended his hand. Maya shook it. His grip was firm, respectful. The Marine Corps needs more officers like you, he said. The whole military does. I'm sorry we failed you on Friday night, but I'm grateful you showed us a better way forward. He left. Reeves followed, squeezing Maya's shoulder as she passed. Holland waited until they were alone. Off the record? Sir? What you did took more courage than anything I've seen in 30 years of service. But it also could have backfired spectacularly. If Brennan had fought harder, if he'd appealed, if his command had pushed back more aggressively, you could have been the one under investigation. I know, sir. Then why risk it? Maya thought about Captain Morrison's daughter in Boston, about every young woman who'd ever been told to just take it, to not make waves, to be grateful for the crumbs of respect thrown their way. Because someone has to go first, sir. Someone has to show that there's a path between accepting abuse and burning everything down in response. I was trained to find solutions in impossible situations. This was just another mission. Holland smiled. Actually smiled. Dismissed, Commander. And for what it's worth, mission accomplished. Maya stood, saluted, and walked out of the conference room into the midday sun. Her phone buzzed immediately. Text from Master Chief Torres. Heard you survived. Beers on me when you're ready to celebrate. Another from Petty Officer Darien. Brennan passed the underwater retrieval this afternoon. 3 minutes flat. Thought you'd want to know. and one from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Rick from the tavern. Your first drink is on the house. Forever. R." She pocketed the phone and started walking toward the training facilities. There was still equipment to inventory, drills to plan, candidates to evaluate. The work didn't stop just because justice had been served. Halfway across the quad, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Brennan stood 20 feet away, still in his dress uniform, alone. They looked at each other across the distance. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he called out. "Good, because I don't. But I wanted you to know, I'm not going to waste this. What you did, giving me another chance." Maya studied him. The shame was real. The remorse was real. But whether it would stick, whether he'd actually change or just learn to hide his prejudice better, that remained to be seen. 3 months from now, there's an advanced dive certification, she said. Volunteers only. Brutal course. 40% washout rate. I'll be there. Don't volunteer for me, Brennan. Don't do it to prove something or earn forgiveness you're not entitled to. Do it because you actually want to be better at your job. He nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. She turned and kept walking. Didn't look back to see if he was still standing there. It didn't matter. What mattered was that somewhere a young Marine was thinking about signing up for a course that would break him open and rebuild him stronger. And maybe, just maybe, when he came out the other side, he'd be the kind of teammate who didn't need to prove his worth by diminishing someone else's. That evening, Maya returned to Rick's tavern. Same booth, same flat soda, same paperback she still hadn't finished. But this time when she walked in, the whole bar went quiet for a different reason. Rick nodded from behind the counter. A group of SEAL candidates in the corner raised their glasses in silent salute. Even the pool players paused their game. She sat down. Rick brought over a fresh soda without being asked, and this time there was a folded napkin underneath it with a single word written in pencil. Respect. Maya opened her book, made it to page 94 before someone approached her table. It was Captain Patricia Reeves, out of uniform, holding a glass of red wine. Mind if I sit? Maya gestured to the empty seat. Reeves settled in, took a sip. I wanted to tell you something off the record. Something I should have said in that hearing, but couldn't with Morrison breathing down everyone's necks. Ma'am? 22 years ago, I was a Lieutenant JG on my first deployment. My CO made inappropriate comments, daily, in front of the whole crew. I reported it. You know what happened? Maya waited. Nothing. Because he was effective. Because the mission came first. Because boys will be boys, and I needed to develop a thicker skin. Reeves's hand tightened on her glass. I stayed in. Fought my way up through a system designed to grind women like us into dust. But I never forgave that CO. Never forgot. And I definitely never gave him a chance to learn from his mistakes. She looked at Maya. What you did today, extending grace while demanding accountability, that's something I never had the wisdom to try. And watching it work? Watching Brennan actually understand what he did wrong? That gave me hope for the first time in years. I'm glad, ma'am. But it didn't work because I'm special. It worked because the system backed me up. You, Commander Holland, Colonel Webb, you all enforced the standards. Without that, my teaching wouldn't have meant anything. Reeves smiled. Don't diminish what you did. But you're right. The system only works when good people use it correctly. We forgot that for a while. Maybe we're remembering now. She finished her wine, stood. Enjoy your book, Commander, and next time someone tries to hit you, hit back. You've earned it. Maya watched her leave, then looked down at the page in front of her. Page 94. The same page she'd been stuck on for weeks. But this time, the words actually made sense. This time, She could focus. She read through to page 100 before closing the book and heading home.
The bruise on her face would fade completely in another week. The video would circulate for months, maybe years, proof that silence could be strategic, that dignity could be tactical, that sometimes the strongest response was no response at all until you'd built an unassailable case. 4 young Marines had learned that harassing a SEAL was suicide, not because she'd destroy them in combat, but because she'd dismantle them with precision, patience, and the very standards they'd spent their careers claiming to uphold. And somewhere on that base, other women were watching, learning, understanding that they didn't have to choose between tolerating abuse and sacrificing their careers fighting it. There was a third path, and Maya Richardson had just shown them how to walk it. 3 weeks passed like water through a sieve. The base settled back into its rhythms: morning PT, afternoon drills, evening liberty calls. But something had shifted underneath the surface. In the mess hall, Marines and SEALs sat together at tables that used to be carefully segregated. In the training yard, instructors started calling out casual racism the way they called out safety violations, immediately, without apology. Maya felt it every time she walked across the compound. The stares had changed. Not hostile anymore, not dismissive. Something closer to curiosity. Respect, maybe. Or fear that she might hold them to the same standard she'd held Brennan. She was in her office reviewing next quarter's training schedules when Master Chief Torres knocked on the doorframe. "Got a minute, Commander?" "Always. What's up?" Torres stepped inside, closed the door. That was unusual. He sat down without being invited, which was even more unusual. "I've been getting calls," he said.
"About?"
"You. Women from 3 different bases asking if you do speaking engagements. A reporter from Navy Times wants an interview. Some advocacy group wants you to keynote their annual conference." He pulled out a notepad covered in his cramped handwriting. "And this morning, I got a call from a lieutenant commander stationed in Pearl Harbor. Says her XO has been making inappropriate comments for 6 months, and she doesn't know how to handle it. Granted to know what you'd do." Maya set down her pen. "What did you tell her?" "That you're not running a counseling service, that she should use her chain of command." He paused. "But then I thought about what you did with Brennan. How you made him understand instead of just destroying him. And I wondered if maybe that's exactly what she needs to hear." "I'm not a role model, Master Chief. I'm just someone who got lucky that her gamble paid off." "Lucky?" Torres leaned forward. "Commander, you turned a potential career-ending assault into a teaching moment that changed how half this base thinks about accountability. That's not luck. That's strategy." "It's also exhausting, and I can't do it for everyone who calls asking for advice." "I know, but you could do it for one person. This lieutenant commander in Hawaii. Her name's Chen. No relation to our Chen. She's Chinese-American, facing the same kind of garbage you dealt with, and she's about to file a formal complaint that'll torpedo her career even if she wins." Maya closed her eyes. She could see it playing out. The investigation that would drag on for months, the whispers that would follow Chen wherever she went, the subtle retaliation disguised as performance concerns. Winning the complaint wouldn't save her. It would just mark her as someone who made trouble. "Give me her number," Maya said. "I'll call her tonight." Torres smiled. "Already texted it to you." "Of course you did." He stood, headed for the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth, Commander, you're changing things. Maybe not the way you planned, maybe not as fast as any of us want, but you're changing things." After he left, Maya stared at her phone for a long time before dialing. The call connected on the 3rd ring. "Lieutenant Commander Chen?" "This is Lieutenant Commander Richardson. Master Chief Torres said you wanted to talk." The relief in Chen's voice was immediate. "Oh, God, yes. Thank you for calling. I didn't think... I know you're busy.
Tell me what's happening." Chen laid it out in careful detail. Her XO made comments about her appearance during staff meetings, asked invasive questions about her dating life, stood too close during briefings. Nothing she could prove was harassment, but everything that made her skin crawl. "I've documented everything," Chen said. "Times, dates, witnesses."
But when I mentioned it to my CO, he said I was being oversensitive, that the XO is just old school and doesn't mean anything by it.
How old school is he?
52. Been in since the 80s. 3 deployments, decorated. Everyone loves him.
Of course they did. Men like that were protected by their reputations, insulated by their service records. Challenging them meant challenging the entire system that had elevated them.
If you file a formal complaint, what happens to your career? Maya asked.
It ends. Maybe not officially, but I'll be the woman who couldn't handle some harmless jokes. I'll never get promoted, never get a good assignment. They'll reassign me somewhere I can't do damage and wait for me to quit. Probably, Maya agreed. So don't file a complaint. Silence on the other end. Then, what? Don't file a complaint. Not yet. First, you change the conditions that make his behavior acceptable.
How? Maya told her. Not everything. Chen's situation was different, required different tactics, but the core principle was the same. Documentation, precision, and making the system work for you instead of against you.
Your XO thrives because nobody calls him out, Maya said. He makes a comment, everyone laughs, and the moment passes. You need to stop the moment from passing. Next time he says something inappropriate in a staff meeting, don't laugh. Don't smile.
Just look at him and say, "Can you clarify what you mean by that, sir?" Make him explain the joke. Make him defend it out loud in front of witnesses.
He'll just say I can't take a joke.
Maybe, but he'll also know you're not going to let it slide anymore, and the next time he does it, you do it again. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand. Can you explain what my appearance has to do with this operational briefing?" Stay calm. Stay professional. Make him work for his harassment. Chen was quiet, processing. That's actually brilliant. It's uncomfortable. It'll make you the difficult one. But it shifts the burden back onto him, makes him defend behavior that shouldn't need defending. And if he retaliates? Document everything, but also excel at your job. Be so good at what you do that any retaliation looks like petty vindictiveness instead of performance management. Make them choose between keeping their bias and keeping someone who makes them look good. You really think this will work? I think it's better than filing a complaint that destroys you while he gets a slap on the wrist. But Chen? Maya paused. This isn't easy. It's going to be lonely. You're going to second-guess yourself every day, and there's no guarantee it works. But it worked for you. Because I had support. Commander Holland, Master Chief Torres, Captain Reeves, they enforced the standards when it mattered. You need to build that network before you need it. Find the people in your command who actually care about accountability. Make allies. They talked for another 20 minutes. By the end, Chen sounded less defeated. Not hopeful exactly, but armed with a plan that didn't require self-destruction. After hanging up, Maya sat in the dark of her office and wondered how many Lieutenant Commander Chens were out there. How many women were fighting these battles alone, convinced their only options were suffer in silence or burn their careers trying to speak up. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. Commander Richardson, this is Captain Sarah Okonkwo, Marine Forces Pacific. We met briefly at the Inter-Service Conference last year. I heard about what happened at your base, and I'd like to discuss implementing similar training protocols in my command. Are you available for a call? Then another. Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Aisha Patel from Coronado. My CO asked me to reach out about developing a bystander intervention curriculum. Your name came up as someone who might consult.
And another. Commander, you don't know me, but I'm a staff sergeant at Camp Pendleton, and I watched the video of what happened to you. I just wanted to say thank you for showing us there's another way to handle this. My daughter is thinking about joining the Navy, and now I don't have to tell her not to. Maya read each message twice. Then she forwarded them to Torres with a single line. I think we need to talk about what happens next. The next morning, she found herself in Commander Holland's office with Torres, Captain Reeves, and a woman she'd never met, a civilian in a sharp suit, who introduced herself as Dr. Rachel Kim from the Department of Defense Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Commander Richardson, Dr. Kim said, shaking her hand. I've been following your case with great interest. It's not a case, ma'am. It's just what happened. What happened is you transformed a clear-cut assault into a teaching opportunity that's generating conversations at the Pentagon. Do you know how rare that is? Maya glanced at Holland. He gave a small shrug that said this wasn't his idea, but he was going along with it. I'm not sure what you want from me, Maya said carefully. I want you to help us redesign how the military handles harassment and discrimination. Current protocols are adversarial. Victim versus perpetrator, punishment versus exoneration. It creates a system where nobody wins except the lawyers. You showed there's a third option. Rehabilitation through accountability. One case doesn't make a system, ma'am. No, but it proves the concept. We've been trying to change military culture through mandatory training and PowerPoint presentations for decades. It doesn't work because it doesn't change hearts and minds. But what you did? That changed someone. That stuck. Reeves leaned forward. The proposal is to develop a pilot program, not replacing the existing complaint system, but supplementing it. For cases where the victim wants restoration instead of retribution, we'd offer a structured mediation process, trained facilitators, clear accountability measures, ongoing monitoring. And if the perpetrator doesn't change? Maya asked. Then they face traditional consequences. This isn't about letting people off easy. It's about giving victims more options than destroy your career fighting this or let it go. Maya looked at each of them. Why me? I'm not a counselor. I'm not trained in conflict resolution. No, Dr. Kim said, but you understand the culture. You know what it's like to weigh your options and realize they all suck. And you demonstrated that strategic patience can be more powerful than immediate retaliation. That's what we need, not experts in theory, but practitioners who've lived it. Torres spoke up for the first time. They're asking you to consult, Commander. Help design the framework. Share your experience, not run the whole program. How much of my time? Initially, maybe 10 hours a month? Conference calls, occasional travel to D.C. We'd work around your training schedule. Maya sat back. Part of her wanted to say no. She'd already done more than she'd signed up for. The Brennan situation was supposed to be a one-time thing, not a blueprint for systemic change. But she thought about Lieutenant Commander Chen in Hawaii, about the staff sergeant's daughter considering the Navy, about every woman who'd face a choice between her dignity and her career because the system only offered binary solutions. I'll do it on 2 conditions, Maya said. First, this program has to be voluntary for victims. No pressure to choose restoration over formal complaints. Real choice means real options. Agreed, Dr. Kim said immediately. Second, we measure success honestly, not by how many people go through the program, but by how many actually change their behavior long-term. If this becomes just another box-checking exercise, I'm out. Dr. Kim smiled. I can work with that. They talked logistics for another hour. By the time Maya left Holland's office, she'd agreed to join a working group developing the pilot program. First meeting in 3 weeks. Travel orders would be cut by Friday. She walked out into the midday sun, feeling like she'd just volunteered for a deployment to terrain she didn't understand. Torres fell into step beside her. You all right, Commander? Honestly, I don't know. I just wanted to do my job and get Brennan to stop being a jackass. Now I'm redesigning DoD policy? That's how it works sometimes. You solve one problem well, and suddenly everyone wants you to solve theirs too. I'm not a savior, Master Chief. I'm just tired. I know, but you're also the right person for this. Not because you're perfect, but because you're honest about how hard it is. They reached the training facility. Through the windows, Maya could see a group running underwater drills. Brennan was in the pool, partnered with Darian again. This time their coordination was smooth, almost graceful. He volunteered for the advanced certification, Torres said, following her gaze. Showed up at my office yesterday asking what he needed to do to qualify. Did you tell him? Told him to pass the next 6 weeks of training without a single incident report. Show up on time. Help his teammates. Keep his mouth shut. He said yes without arguing. Maya watched Brennan surface, shake water from his eyes, listen intently to whatever Darian was telling him. 3 weeks ago, he'd have interrupted, would have insisted he knew better. You think he's actually changed? She asked. I think he's trying. Whether that sticks when things get hard again, we'll see. At 1400, Maya ran her regular training rotation. 20 candidates, mixed Marine and SEAL, all of them treating her with the careful respect people show when they're not sure where the boundaries are. Halfway through the session, she noticed a young woman standing near the observation deck. Civilian clothes, visitor badge, notepad in hand. The woman caught Maya's eye and gave a small wave. After dismissing the rotation, Maya climbed the stairs to where the woman waited. Commander Richardson? I'm Jennifer Torres, no relation to Master Chief. I'm a reporter with Navy Times. I was hoping I'm not doing interviews. I understand. But this isn't about you specifically. I'm writing about changing military culture, and I'd love to get your perspective on— What did I just say? Jennifer held up her hands. Okay, fair. But can I ask one question off the record? You don't have to answer. Maya waited. Everyone wants to make you a hero. The woman who stood up to harassment and won. But from what I've read, it sounds like you don't see it that way. So how do you see it? Maya considered her for a long moment. I see it as doing what needed to be done. That's all. But you changed how people think about— I changed one person's behavior in one situation. Everything else is people projecting their own needs onto that story. They want a hero because heroes are simple. They're inspiring. They give us permission to believe things can get better. She paused. But I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who got tired of accepting unacceptable things. Jennifer was scribbling frantically. I thought this was off the record. It is, but you'll use it anyway, won't you? You'll quote an anonymous source, and everyone will know it's me, and I'll spend the next month dealing with people wanting to talk about my feelings. Jennifer had the grace to look embarrassed. For what it's worth, I think what you did was important. Then write about the policy changes. Write about the lieutenant commanders like Chen who are still fighting these battles alone. Write about the system that forces women to choose between their safety and their careers. Maya turned toward the stairs. Write about anything except me. She left before Jennifer could respond. That night, Maya went for a run on the beach, 8 miles in soft sand, pushing until her legs burned and her lungs screamed. The physical pain was clean, simple, something she could understand and control. She was stretching near the parking lot when her phone rang. Unknown number with a Hawaii area code. Richardson? Commander, it's Chen. I just wanted to tell you, I did it. The staff meeting this morning, the XO made a comment about my outfit, and I asked him to clarify what he meant. You should have seen his face. Maya smiled despite herself. How'd he respond? He stammered something about professionalism and then moved on. But here's the thing. After the meeting, 2 other officers pulled me aside. Both women. both saying they'd noticed his behavior too. I'm not alone anymore. That's good, Chen. Really good. I know it's just the start. I know it might get worse before it gets better. But for the first time in 6 months, I feel like I have some power. So thank you. After hanging up, Maya sat on the hood of her car watching the sun disappear into the Pacific. The sky turned orange, then purple, then that deep blue that's almost black. She thought about Brennan in the pool, actually listening to his partner, about Lieutenant Commander Chen finding her voice, about the pilot program that might help other women find theirs. Small changes, incremental progress, nothing dramatic, nothing that would make headlines, but real, sustainable, the kind of change that might actually stick. Her phone buzzed again. Text from Darian. Brennan asked me to tell you he made it through today without incident. Said he didn't want to bother you directly, but thought you'd want to know. Maya typed back, "Tell him I don't keep score, just standards." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "He said he knows. That's why it matters." She drove back to base with the windows down, letting the salt air fill her lungs. Tomorrow she'd be back in the training bay, running drills, evaluating candidates, doing the job she'd signed up for before any of this started. But tonight, she let herself feel something close to satisfaction. Not pride, exactly, not happiness, just the quiet knowledge that somewhere the needle had moved. The culture had shifted by a millimeter, and millimeters, given enough time and pressure, could become miles. When she got home, there was a package waiting on her doorstep. No return address. Inside was a single bottle of expensive bourbon, Rick's top shelf, the stuff he never served the Friday crowd. The note said, "For showing us that silence can roar louder than violence. First bottle's on me. Everyone after, you earn it. R." Maya set the bottle on her kitchen counter, unopened. She wasn't much of a drinker, but she kept it there anyway, a reminder that some people understood what she'd been trying to do. That some people got it. And in a world that usually rewarded quick fixes and dramatic gestures, maybe that was enough. 6 weeks later, Maya stood at the edge of the advanced dive certification pool, watching 23 candidates prepare for the most brutal test of their training. The water was colder than regulation, the visibility deliberately reduced to 6 inches, and the weighted obstacles positioned at depths that would punish hesitation and reward precision. Brennan was in the first group. He'd shown up every day for 42 consecutive days without a single incident report. No arguments, no complaints, just quiet competence that Maya had learned not to trust completely, because men like him could fake reform until the pressure got high enough to crack the facade. "First team, gear check," she called out. Brennan and his partner, a SEAL candidate named Torres, moved through their equipment inspection with practiced efficiency. When they finished, they stood at attention, waiting for the signal. Maya checked her stopwatch. "You have 12 minutes to complete the underwater obstacle course, retrieve the distressed diver mannequin from the secondary chamber, and return to the surface with full safety protocols. Time begins on the horn. Failure means disqualification from certification. Any questions?" Nobody spoke. "Then get ready." The horn sounded. They dove. Maya watched the surface ripple and settle, watched the clock tick forward, watched the observation monitors that showed grainy footage of bodies moving through murky water. At the 4-minute mark, Brennan's regulator malfunctioned. The monitor showed him signaling to Torres, showing him the problem, not panicking, despite the fact that he was 20 feet down with a failing oxygen supply. Torres immediately offered his backup regulator. Brennan took it. They buddy-breathed for 30 seconds, while Torres worked to clear Brennan's primary line. When it wouldn't clear, Torres made the call. Surface together, take the disqualification together, or split up and let Torres finish alone while Brennan aborted. Brennan pointed up, signaling for Torres to continue without him. Torres shook his head, grabbed Brennan's harness, and together they navigated to the distressed diver mannequin, secured it between them, and began the ascent using a single functioning regulator and perfect coordination. They surfaced at 11 minutes and 47 seconds. Maya didn't smile, didn't congratulate them, just marked her clipboard and said, "Acceptable. Next team." But Master Chief Torres, watching from the observation deck, caught her eye and nodded once. That small gesture carried more weight than any words. After the final team completed their run, Maya dismissed the candidates and started breaking down equipment. She was coiling air hoses when Brennan approached, still dripping from the pool. "Commander?" She didn't look up. "Congratulations on your certification, Brennan. You earned it." "I wanted to ask." He stopped, started again. "The hearing is sealed, right? My record shows the Article 15, but not the details?" "That's correct." "So most people don't know what I did. To you." Maya set down the hose, looked at him directly. "What's your point?" "I've been thinking about that a lot. How easy it would be to just move on. Tell myself I learned my lesson and never talk about it again. Let people assume the Article 15 was for something minor." He swallowed hard. "But that feels like another kind of cowardice." "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking if I have permission to tell the truth. When people ask what happened, can I tell them I assaulted a superior officer? That I used racial slurs? That you chose to teach me instead of destroy me, and I'm trying every day to be worthy of that choice." Maya studied him. 6 weeks ago, this would have sounded like performance, like a man saying what he thought she wanted to hear. But there was something different in his voice now. Something broken open and rebuilt, slightly crooked. "You don't need my permission to tell your own story, Brennan. But understand that once you do, you can't control how people react. Some will respect your honesty, others will use it against you. The Marine Corps doesn't always reward transparency." "I know, but keeping it secret feels like I haven't really changed. Like I'm still the guy who thought his reputation mattered more than doing the right thing." Maya picked up the hose again, continued coiling. "Then tell the truth. Own what you did. And when people ask why Commander Richardson didn't have you court-martialed, tell them it's because she believed accountability and transformation aren't mutually exclusive." Brennan nodded, turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, ma'am, I think about that night every single day. Not because I feel sorry for myself, but because I need to remember what I'm capable of when I stop thinking about consequences. When I let my anger make decisions." "Good. Don't stop remembering. That's not punishment, Brennan. That's wisdom." He walked away, shoulders straight, carrying the weight of what he'd done like it was part of his gear now, something he'd never be able to put down completely. 2 days later, Maya flew to Washington, D.C. for the pilot program's first full working session. The conference room at the Pentagon was intimidatingly formal. Polished wood, leather chairs, walls covered in photographs of secretaries of defense going back decades. Dr. Kim introduced her to the rest of the team. Colonel Sarah Okonkwo from Marine Forces Pacific, the same officer who'd texted weeks ago. Commander James Park from Naval Personnel Command. Dr. Michael Sterling, a civilian psychologist who specialized in restorative justice. And Captain Patricia Reeves, who gave Maya a small smile that said they were in this together. "Let's start with the fundamental question," Dr. Kim said, pulling up a presentation. "Current system. Victim files complaint, investigation launches, perpetrator either faces consequences or doesn't, case closes. Success is measured by conviction rate. What's wrong with this model?" "It treats harassment like a legal problem instead of a cultural one," Commander Park said immediately. You can win the case and lose the war because the culture that enabled the harassment never changes. Colonel Okonkwo nodded. And it forces victims into an adversarial role. You become the person who caused trouble instead of the person who was wronged. Even when you win, you lose. So what's the alternative? Dr. Sterling asked, playing devil's advocate. We let harassers off easy because changing culture is hard? No, Maya said. All eyes turned to her. We create a parallel track. For victims who want it, where the goal isn't punishment, it's transformation. But, and this is critical, transformation still requires accountability, real consequences, just different ones. Walk us through it, Dr. Kim said, using your case as a model. Maya stood, walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker. Brennan assaulted me. I could have filed charges immediately, but I knew that would start a process where I had no control over the outcome. He might get convicted, might not. Either way, I'd be sidelined while lawyers fought it out. She drew a timeline. Instead, I documented, built an evidence file that was unassailable. Then I changed the battlefield, brought him into my training rotation, where I had authority, and he had to perform to objective standards. And when he attacked you again? Reeves asked. I defended myself, documented that too, and let the system proceed to a hearing. But at the hearing, I advocated for consequences that would actually change his behavior instead of just ending his career. Dr. Sterling leaned forward. But how do you know it worked? How do you measure transformation versus performance? You don't. Not immediately. That's why the monitoring has to be long-term. Brennan's been under observation for 6 weeks. Still is. If he backslides, the original charges are still available. But if he continues to demonstrate changed behavior, then maybe he becomes proof that people can grow. Colonel Okonkwo pulled out her own notes. I've been working on implementation protocols. For this to work, we need 3 things: voluntary participation from victims, trained facilitators who understand military culture, and clear metrics for success that aren't just about reconciliation, but about genuine behavioral change. They worked for 6 hours straight, breaking only for coffee and bathroom runs. By the end, they had a rough framework, a restorative accountability program that would run parallel to traditional complaint processes. Victims could choose which path to take. If they chose restoration, they'd work with trained facilitators to develop accountability plans specific to their situation. Perpetrators who refused to participate or failed to meet standards would face traditional consequences. This will be controversial, Commander Park said as they wrapped up. A lot of people will see it as soft on harassment. Let them, Maya said. We're not trying to convince everyone. We're trying to give victims more options than suffer or destroy themselves fighting back. Dr. Kim nodded. We'll pilot it at 3 bases over the next year. Evaluate outcomes, adjust protocols. If it works, we expand. If it doesn't, we learn from failure and try something else. As the meeting adjourned, Reeves pulled Maya aside. You know this is just the beginning, right? Once this program launches, you'll be the face of it, whether you want to be or not. I know. And you're okay with that? Maya thought about Lieutenant Commander Chen finding her voice, about Brennan learning to listen, about the staff sergeant's daughter who might join the Navy because she saw a different path was possible. I'm not okay with it, she said honestly, but I'm willing to do it anyway. There's a difference. Back at base the following week, Maya walked into the training facility and found a surprise waiting. The entire SEAL candidate class and half the Marine training company stood in formation. As she entered, they came to attention. Master Chief Torres stepped forward. Commander, the candidates wanted to present you with something. A young SEAL candidate named Williams approached, holding a wooden plaque. On it was engraved, Lieutenant Commander Maya Richardson, for demonstrating that the strongest response to violence is strategic patience, for teaching us that dignity is tactical, for proving that changing one mind can change a culture, from the candidates who learned by watching. Maya took the plaque, felt the weight of it, looked at the faces staring at her with something between respect and hope. "I don't want this," she said, confused silence. "Not because I don't appreciate it, but because this isn't about me. It's about a choice every single one of you will face at some point in your career. When someone disrespects you, when someone crosses a line, when someone makes you choose between your dignity and your future, you'll have options. You can respond with immediate force, you can file a complaint and trust the system, or you can do what I did. Calculate the battlefield, document everything, and respond with precision instead of rage." She set the plaque down. "But whatever you choose, make it your choice. Don't let me or anyone else tell you there's only one right way to handle injustice. Because there isn't. There's only the way that lets you sleep at night and keeps you in the fight long enough to make a difference." She paused. "Now get back to training. We've got ocean drills in 30 minutes, and I don't accept excuses for being late." They dispersed, but Williams stayed behind. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something." "Go ahead." "My sister was assaulted in college. She reported it, and the whole process destroyed her. She dropped out, moved home, still has nightmares. When I heard what happened to you and how you handled it, I called her and told her the story, and she said—" Williams's voice cracked slightly. "She said it was the first time since her assault that she didn't feel like she'd failed by not fighting back hard enough." Maya's throat tightened. "Your sister didn't fail. The system failed her." "I know, but hearing that from you, someone who actually faced violence and chose a different path, that meant something she couldn't hear from me or our parents." Williams met her eyes. "So thank you. Not for me. For her." After he left, Maya stood alone in the empty training bay. The plaque sat on the bench where she'd left it, wood gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She picked it up, read the inscription again, and for the first time since that night at Rick's Tavern, she let herself feel something beyond strategic calculation. She felt proud. Not of the outcome. Outcomes were always uncertain, always fragile. But of the choice to try. To believe that transformation was possible even when punishment was deserved. That evening, Maya returned to Rick's Tavern. Same booth, same flat soda, same dog-eared paperback that she'd finally finished and started again from the beginning. The door opened. Brennan walked in. He saw her immediately, hesitated, then walked over to the bar and ordered a club soda. Rick served it without comment, though his eyes tracked to Maya briefly before returning to his work. Brennan took his drink to a table on the opposite side of the room. Not hiding, but not imposing either. Just existing in the same space, proving to himself, and maybe to her, that he could be in this bar and make different choices. Maya turned a page. Didn't acknowledge him, didn't need to. An hour passed. Then Rick walked over to Maya's booth with 2 glasses, set one in front of her, fresh soda, and carried the other to Brennan's table. "From the lady in the corner," Rick said quietly. "She says you've earned the right to sit in the same bar without shame, but you haven't earned the right to forget why you're drinking club soda instead of bourbon." Brennan took the glass, looked across the room at Maya. She raised her own glass slightly. Not a toast, just an acknowledgement that they were both here, both trying, both carrying weight that would never fully lift, but might get easier to bear. He nodded back and went back to his own thoughts. When Maya finally left at midnight, She walked past Brennan's table. He stood automatically, old military courtesy kicking in. "At ease, Brennan. We're off duty." "Ma'am, Commander, I just wanted to say that I told my parents what I did. What really happened. My dad said I should have kept my mouth shut, that telling the truth wouldn't help anything. But my mom..." He swallowed. "My mom said she was ashamed of who I'd been and proud of who I'm trying to become." "Listen to your mother," Maya said. "She's smarter than your father." She walked out into the cool night air. Her phone buzzed. Text from Lieutenant Commander Chen. "XO put in for early retirement. No explanation given. But 3 women in the command approached me about starting a mentorship program. Things are changing." Another from Dr. Kim. "Pentagon just approved expanded pilot program. 6 bases instead of 3. Launch date in 4 months. Hope you're ready for this." And one from a number she didn't recognize. "Commander Richardson, you don't know me. I'm a private first class at Fort Hood. I saw the video of what happened to you and how you handled it. I've been dealing with similar harassment, and I was about to quit. But watching you made me realize I have more options than I thought. Thank you for showing me what strength actually looks like. It's not fighting back. It's fighting smart." Maya stood under the streetlight reading messages from women she'd never met, whose lives had been changed by a choice she'd made in a moment of crisis. She thought about the impossibility of it all, how one punch in a bar had cascaded into policy changes and cultural shifts and conversations that were happening in bases across the country. She thought about the responsibility of it, how every decision she made from here forward would be scrutinized, interpreted, used as evidence that her approach either worked or didn't. How she'd become a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. And she thought about Brennan sitting in that bar drinking club soda, trying every day to be better than the worst thing he'd ever done. About Lieutenant Commander Chen finding her voice. About the private first class at Fort Hood choosing to stay instead of quit. Small transformations, individual changes, nothing that would show up in quarterly readiness reports or congressional testimony, but real, sustainable, the kind of progress that might actually last. Maya walked to her car, drove back to base, and sat in the parking lot for a long time before going inside. The plaque from the candidates was on her passenger seat. She picked it up, ran her fingers over the engraved words. "For demonstrating that the strongest response to violence is strategic patience." She'd spent 12 years as a Navy SEAL learning how to respond to threats with overwhelming force, how to neutralize enemies before they could strike, how to win through superior firepower and tactical precision. But in that bar 6 weeks ago, she'd learned something new, that sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't strength or speed or violence. It was the choice to absorb a blow, document the impact, and use the system designed to protect the powerful, to transform the person who'd hurt you. It was the understanding that dignity wasn't something you defended with your fists. It was something you reclaimed through discipline, patience, and the absolute certainty that you deserved better than what you'd been given. It was knowing when to fight and when to teach, when to destroy and when to rebuild, when to demand justice and when to create it yourself. The bruise on Maya's face had faded weeks ago. The split lip had healed without a scar. But the memory of that night would never fully disappear. And she didn't want it to. Because that memory was proof that she'd stood at a crossroads between rage and strategy, between immediate satisfaction and long-term change, between destroying one man and transforming a culture. And she'd chosen the harder path, the uncertain path, the path that required her to believe people could grow, even when they didn't deserve the chance. Not because she was a hero, not because she was particularly forgiving or enlightened or special, but because she understood something that most people spent their whole lives avoiding, that real change doesn't happen through punishment alone. It happens through the difficult, uncomfortable, unglamorous work of teaching people why their behavior was wrong and giving them the tools to be better. It happens when victims refuse to be defined by what was done to them and instead become architects of what comes next. It happens when one woman looks at a system designed to break her and decides to use it to build something new instead. Maya Richardson had been punched in the face by a man who thought her silence meant surrender, who thought her patience meant weakness, who thought being a black woman in a SEAL uniform made her an acceptable target. He learned the hard way that silence was strategy, that patience was power, that the woman he'd hit wasn't weak. She was waiting for exactly the right moment to teach him why. Starting a fight with someone who'd spent a decade mastering tactical precision was the biggest mistake of his life. Not because she destroyed him, but because she gave him something far more valuable and far more terrifying than punishment. She gave him the opportunity to become better than he'd been, and then she held him accountable to that opportunity every single day, until he understood that transformation wasn't a gift, it was a responsibility. That was the real story, not the punch, not the hearing, not even the policy changes. The real story was that Maya Richardson looked at a broken system, a violent man, and an impossible choice, and she created a fourth option that nobody knew existed. She proved that you don't have to choose between your dignity and your future, between justice and mercy, between fighting back and giving up. You can choose precision, strategy, the long game. You can choose to be the person who changes the rules by following them better than anyone thought possible. And when the world asks if you won, when they want to know if fighting smart was worth more than fighting hard, you can look them in the eye and say what Maya Richardson would say: the fight isn't over. The culture hasn't transformed overnight. The system still has miles to go before it treats everyone with the dignity they deserve. But today, one more woman has options she didn't have yesterday. One more perpetrator understands consequences beyond punishment. One more command has tools for accountability that don't require destroying everyone involved. And tomorrow, there will be another woman making the same impossible choice Maya made. Another victim calculating whether to fight or flee or find the narrow path between. And now, because of what happened in that bar and everything that followed, she'll know there's a third way. She'll know that silence can roar, that patience can win, that the strongest response to violence isn't always more violence. Sometimes it's the discipline to absorb the blow, document the damage, and build a case so airtight that the system designed to protect your attacker has no choice but to hold him accountable while giving him room to grow. That's not weakness. That's not surrender. That's not letting them get away with it. That's warfare conducted with precision instead of rage. That's justice delivered through transformation instead of destruction. That's what happens when you punch a Navy SEAL in the face and learn too late that she wasn't quiet because she couldn't fight back. She was quiet because she was building something you couldn't see until it was already too late to escape.